You are listening to the Park Flyer Podcast, where we discuss our RC adventures.
Welcome to the Park Flyer Podcast, where we discuss the ups and downs of the new RC Flyer. Join your hosts, Michael and Jay, as they take flight at the park. Now on with the show.
Welcome back to the Park Flyer Podcast. I'm Michael from Arizona. With me always, my good friends.
Jay from the hills of Texas.
And AK Mike in Texas.
And welcome back. We took a quick break. We were discussing Jim's, mishap at the field. We were talking a little bit about learning to use the rudder. So anyway, Mike was saying, basically that that he learned to crab first, and I think that's a good idea, is to learn to crab. But, like I said last time, I think coming down the runway and try to maintain that heading down the runway is probably the best solution. And
I like that.
Yeah. So anyway, I mean, we'll have to, like I said, see how that works. But I think that ultimately learning crosswind is very important, because otherwise, now at Jay's field, you can pretty much land any direction you want. It's just an open piece of grass, as long as he mows. Maybe you should just mow a big circle, Jay, and then you really wouldn't have to worry about it. You could just land any way you wanted, right? But if you do have a runway and you're standing the runway, then it's important to learn to land and fly that pattern. And I think we were talking before about getting too far out where you can't see your airplane. You gotta crab back to yourself in the wind. So,
well, I think part of the problem that Jim was having was not, we hadn't been flying for so long, and just like anything else, if you're not using your skills, you need a couple of times to come back, just get your eye reset, and just get your whole, getting ahead of the aircraft, not being behind the aircraft, and all that kind of stuff. How far to get it out, how far to keep it in, and it just takes a little while.
It is somewhat of a perishable skill.
Yeah. So
it does.
It's definitely something that I think for the first time out, and then all of a sudden the wind pops up, and it's it's the Windageddon out there.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, the wind flap, the wind sock just doing propeller out there. Might not have been the best day to fly.
Well, here's something. Here's something that I usually tell. I have several many years instructing in real aircraft, and I will tell you that guys will always say, "Oh, I don't want to really fly when it's windy." And I'm like, yeah, that's fantastic. But eventually at some point you're going to come out here with no wind and you're going to take off. And when you get airborne, things are going to change and it's going to get really windy. So
or
unless
you move to Texas,
right. Or you move to, that's right. You move to Texas. But, it also happens like in the morning, right? You're flying in the morning. It's nice and calm. When all that heat starts, that,
convection
reacting,
yep.
Then your convection activity, then you start getting puffy clouds, and then you start getting the wind. And in Jay's field, there's mountains around, so you've got wind coming through there, and so there, you could be flying, especially if you have now. In Jim's case, I don't know how long his battery lasts, but if you had something else that lasted quite a while, maybe 7 to 10 minutes, in that 7 to 10 minutes, things could change. And I've seen it happen here. Barry took off in his, F-18 turbine, and it was nice and calm. The sock was just sitting there limp, and, he flew for 3 minutes, 4 minutes. And as soon as he's like, I'll go a couple more times around, big gale force winds came through, and now he's got to change runways because, he's landing, left to right, and now he's got to land right to left because the wind changed and it's picked up, and now it's a different crosswind. And having said that, that's another thing that you should do. You should get comfortable flying left to right and right to left, because I know a lot of guys, Big Mike was that way.
Big Mike
right?
definitely was like that.
He would only fly one way because he felt more comfortable, with that profile coming that direction. And then if it went the other way,
because he was a Republican, but
I don't think it was that way. It wasn't that way. But yeah, it's you kind of have to get comfortable both ways, because the wind could be coming straight into your face, which means you're dropping a wing away from you versus dropping a wing towards you, right? So if the wind is coming from your right down the runway and it's coming, at a crosswind from like over your shoulder, then you're dropping the wing towards you and you're looking at the top of your airplane as you're coming in. If you had to swap that around and now the wind's coming the other direction, then you actually have to drop the wing opposite you and then use opposite rudder, right, to bring the nose towards you. So there is a little technique in it, and it's stuff that you should practice. I feel like you should practice on the simulator.
Well,
I remember flying at the Electric Fest and watching folks just come straight at the flight box instead of flying crosswind. They would just come straight at because the wind was at our backs, pushing across the runway, and they'd fly straight in. And I was constantly like, yeah, I don't think that's that good of an idea. I'm going to go stand over here because I just don't think that's a good idea. But, not everybody can do the rudder. So,
well, I was really saying,
and it's an important factor.
One of the things that's been making me think
Jay.
about, just to remember, that kind of helped me with my rudder skills was flying the Fun Cub. And so I got one of the things I like to practice on was just doing flat turns, so I'd go out there and I would just overemphasize, with the rudder and see just how slow and how flat I could make a turn in the air, where I could do a circle, going one way, clockwise, counterclockwise, and I would just do these circles, just practicing with my thumb, and on a calm day, it's pretty neat. And it's a good skill because, it's repeatable. And then when it gets a little windy, it's amazing what you can do with that type of high wing plane, playing with the rudder and all, that you have a lot of control over how it turns, how it flies. And all of a sudden the crosswinds weren't a problem anymore because I could quite literally, like I said, after doing all that practicing with the flat turn stuff, I could come in, crab the plane in, or, turn the plane, almost, at 90 degrees flying sideways down the field. And I'm like, that's cool, Right. So I'll definitely have to I just need to get his Cub, that, like I said, that one from Hobby King that he has, get that thing configured right, and then he can start practicing on that, because that plane's essentially a Fun Cub. So
yeah, is it the same size?
It's about the same size. It's about the same size. Has all the features, it's flaps and the whole 9 yards. But it's essentially the same plane. And it's just that in his radio, like I said, for his flaps, the flaps are too sensitive. Meaning, like, you bump them and it moves up. They move a huge degree with the way that it's set up now. And I'm just like, wow, they're just a little bit too sensitive, and they move instantly, where, I have mine slowed down so that when you flip the switch,
yours come out
at
a second or two.
Yeah, at a reduced rate, right? So and that helps a lot too. Instead of having them just 50% pow goes directly to 50%,
Hello,
and then the plane
here
will
they
jump,
are.
right, and the plane will jump and react to that, right? Well, if you got them on a what do they call it, a slow down thing in the radio. And so it takes a delay. You have a delay in the radio, and then if you're able to deploy them and it takes 2 seconds or 3 seconds, well, now the plane doesn't react at all when you have them set up like that.
Yeah, it's very helpful. Hey, so I'm going to ask a question that isn't kind of related to this, but I think it still sort of is. I have a friend that just bought a plane that has safe in it, safe technology.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay, I've never flown a plane before. What should I do? Like, it's got safe technology. Shouldn't I be able to fly? I said, yeah, you should be able to, but I think it's a mistake to fly it without having ever flown a plane with somebody else, or at the very least, a simulator plane. And yeah, you should be able to hit that safe button and the thing should land on its own, sure. But again, given all things, that wouldn't be the best first thing to do in my mind. Now, I have heard of people doing it, but I don't know how successful. What's the success rate on that? So what do you guys think?
Well,
what should I tell this guy?
No, I mean, he could do it, but just he needs to understand what the safe settings are, right? Because there are like 3 different settings, and he can fly the one that doesn't allow him to bank more than 30 degrees, or pitch more than 10 degrees or whatever. And that way, when he takes off, if he's really aggressive on the sticks, the airplane just
won't matter.
Won't matter, right? Is it advisable to go out there just in the field somewhere and try to fly it the first time? Probably not, unless if you have a simulator, I would jump on there and try to get your thumbs at least looking at the right direction and being able to come back towards you. That's the biggest problem. But
it's still not going to help if it's a crosswind.
I've flown the safe ones. Yeah, I mean, it's going to happen the same thing that we just talked about, right? He's going to be on a really calm day. He's going to take off, and then all of a sudden the wind's going to go blow his airplane out, and he's not going to know how to get it back. So, if it's a high wing, slow, park flyer or a trainer, and it's got safe in there, and he can hit the button and ride itself or all that, I don't necessarily think that it will be devastating, but, that remains to be seen. If he tries to do what I normally see is guys that will do the safe, and then it doesn't do what they want it to do, so they change the settings. And then they go in there and they go, well, it won't roll or it won't do this. And they want to do all that right away, right? Instead of learning just to kind of go around the pattern and land. Take off and land is the most important part, because you can go up there and do all the aerobatics you want. But if you can't take off and land, it's going to, you're going to buy a new airplane. So,
well, right. Every plane can fly once, right?
Yep. Yeah. Every plane can. He can get it up and he can do all this fun stuff if he wants to, but that may be the last time, and he'll have to be putting parts back on it. So, unfortunately, I see guys that jump ahead way too quickly. They'll take off and they'll go, well, that's easy, and then they'll come down and they'll say, okay, well, that didn't do anything, and they'll change it out. Then when they get up there, it's all crazy, and they're like, oh my gosh, and then right in the ground, and they're like, well, that didn't last long.
Right.
So just be patient. Right. I would tell him to be patient and, try to learn all the skills.
Yeah, I don't think that's in his repertoire. I don't think he understands what that word is. So I think that, I just told him, if you're going to do it, at least get a simulator. And if you're not going to listen to either one of those two things, then good luck. Have a good time.
Good luck. Hey, I'll sell you parts.
Here's where to go
seriously,
to get parts.
Exactly. Because he just, it just wasn't. It wasn't something that he seemed to be willing to listen to or
well, there's people out
understand.
there. I mean, we had a guy show up the field with a turbine, never flown RC airplane before. He's like, this is what I want to fly. We're like, that's not right. Took off.
No kidding?
Okay. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
six turbines
successfully
later.
landed hard.
6 turbines later.
6 turbines later, because he just kept going out and buying a new one. So the guy eventually learned to fly it, but it cost him a lot of money, because those turbines ain't cheap.
I guess if you got a lot of money to spend, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, that's true. For him, it was just a toy. Well,
right.
For the rest of it's a crying episode. It's like, oh no, my bank account just got smaller, and I'm over here bawling like a little 2-year-old. My toy broke. But yeah, I don't know. I think I think the skills involved in doing this, it's definitely worth it if you spend some time on a simulator. Even if you find a free one that just gives you some, kind of crappy graphics, you don't have to spend the money on the, on the more expensive ones. But I think, Real Flight to me, and I've tried a bunch of them.
Yeah, it will. Basics of how to, how to fly.
Yeah, before I had Real Flight, I think Jay gave me something that was like a freeware or something, and I flew around.
I used that free one too, and it's not terrible.
No, I mean, it's kind of choppy in 1980s, but it did the job. But then when Real Flight came out, I was like, holy smokes, this is a world of difference. It actually felt like I was at the field flying. And I think Superstition Air Park is in there, so you can actually literally go out where we have the Arizona Electric Festival and fly that particular field. So that was kind of fun. The first time I actually went out and flew the real field, because I'd already been flying it on, Real Flight. So it was kind of cool to go out and see it. So anyway, well, so Jay, we were kind of going back to this gym thing. Do you think that? And I think you may have missed it the first one. Mike and I were talking about it earlier, but we were saying that the Zaggy that he flew first and the EDF, neither one have rudders.
No, it does not have rudder.
So do you think that this is an issue of flying airplanes that don't have them? He's just not used to using it, and then jumping into something that is, or I mean, does he not make that transition? I mean, Jim would know, but, I'm trying to give him the benefit of the doubt that if you just go fly 2 airplanes that don't have it, you don't use it. And I know you and I have talked about before that regardless of when I fly the Zaggy or the Tough Wing or the, whatever airplane it is, the Fun Jet, you name it, I use the rudder as if it had a rudder. Right. My thumb will actually go in the direction of the turn or opposite the turn.
Oh, I see.
Because my thumb, in my brain, my thumb is working the rudder as if it would have one, even though it does not. And Jay mentioned it one time. He saw me when I was tumbling the Tough Wing, and I had full throttle and left rudder. And he's like, it has no rudder. How are you getting it to do that? How's that help?
Yeah.
It helps me because I'm constantly using that thumb, the throttle, and but when I go back to 3D, I'm not just dropping it. So anyway, I was interested to see if your thoughts on that, if that was something that you felt was a factor, or if it just, it wasn't a factor at all.
No, I just think it's, just the way he's just flown for years, just like anything else, habits, right? So it's kind of like me and the twanging thing, right? So in case the listeners don't know.
I remember that.
So whenever I'm around Mike, wherever we're at and we're flying, well, we were I don't remember where we were at, but anyway, I'm flying the plane and Mike went, "What's that?" And I go, "What's what?" He goes, "Did you hear that?" And I go, "I don't know what you're talking about." So I'm flying and that right there. What were you doing? And I go, "Oh, I was rolling it or I was doing something." He's like, "Do you just let go of the stick?" And I go, "I don't know."
Sproing.
Yeah.
That's
and
it.
So what was
That's
happening
what
is I'd roll the plane, and I'd have it all the way over to the left or right, and I'd let go, and it would center itself, right? Twang, or twang, as it was. And so then, he's like, "Hey, man, you're twanging the sticks. You shouldn't just let go of the sticks like that." And I'm like, "I'm doing what? Who, what, where now?" So, in order to get it across to me, what's one of the things I like to use? So the technique for me to be used is negative reinforcement. So Mike started going, "Hey,
there you go.
You got to stop twanging on that guitar, man. You're going to break it." I'm like, "What? Twanging on the?" "Oh, because I was letting go of the stick." And he'd be over there. He'd start whistling a tune, a Western tune as I'm flying, and I'm like, "Am I twanging the sticks again?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's rather annoying." And and after that, I became self-conscious of it, and I stopped.
Twang.
Yeah, so
twang,
I won't say
twang.
that I won't say that I'm 100%, but it definitely reduced my twanging on my sticks and stuff. And I just think it's we get in habits. Like you said, I'm flying by myself, or whatever. So I don't have anybody to correct me or to point out my flaws, and so it's good that it does, because, like I said, it helped me, and I think as for Jim, it's not a thing of him being a bad pilot, so to speak. I just think the guys that he was hanging out with or flying with, they never had to worry about flying, with their using a rudder, or they flew at such open fields they didn't have to worry about it, and it wasn't an issue.
Landed into the wind all the time.
As I understand it, the field that we fly at compared to some of the other fields is, it's definitely not as wide. It's narrower because of the trees that are on the outside of it. Even though it's a very long field, it is bracketed by trees. And I think some of the other fields he's been at have been kind of pretty much wide open places that you didn't have to, you just flew in whatever direction you wanted to. So just maybe one of those things that.
Well, the field in San Antonio is kind of somewhat like that, or where we went down and flew off they've got a paved runway, I think.
Oh, with your buddy?
But they, So, but remember, it's kind of wide open, just empty space out there. And then where you and I went on our trip down to New Mexico, the place that we stopped to fly was just a wide open space.
That in the sky,
but and so I can understand. It was in the middle of the desert, but I can understand that. If you don't have flying on a field like yours where you have open space versus flying on a paved runway, you definitely have to learn a little bit more on a paved runway than you would, because you can't just land across the runway.
Right.
It's just too narrow to do. Or, it drops off the other side and you just rip the gear off, one of the two.
Right. So I just think it's just the way he's flown all of his life, or the places that he's flown that hasn't been important, right? And so now that we're flying at this specific field, that we're in this bracketed field, that it's definitely you have to land it on the runway, or if you're off the runway, you're in the grass. You land it in the grass. You can't,
Right.
So
the high grass over on the other side. Yeah. Well, I want our listeners to understand too that we're not really picking on Jim. Jim's a great pilot. I've been out there and seen him do some great things, and he does have a lot of airplanes and he flies them really well. These are more just techniques, and people reach out and say, hey, this, you look like you're having a problem, and we're willing to offer advice. Now, whether people take it or not, it's up to them, but we're not really hammering on anybody. These are just, a way to kind of get a little bit better skill. Some people want to do it, some people don't. It's really up to them, but we're not harping on Jim. I think he does a really, really good job, but these are little things that he might be able to use to make, that even better, and maybe not crash as much, right? So, or at least crash the last time. And getting out there and doing it more is definitely, it is a very perishable skill.
That's
I mean,
one of the
I've been
biggest
doing it a
things.
long time, and I do it. Yeah. I mean, I do it for a living, and so even going back to RC World, it may take me a couple of flights to kind of get my hands back into this is what I'm doing. And I've done that where, I laid off a week or 2 or 3 and then jumped out there, and next thing you know, I've got a turbine, the Barry hands me and says, hey, go fly this one, and it takes me a couple times around, and then my brain catches back up to it, and then I'm like, oh, okay, here we go, right? But the initial couple of loops around the pattern, it's just me trying to get, a feel for where the wind's coming from, because the wind at the surface may not be the same as the wind at 1,500, not 15, but 400 feet. That should be it's going to be different. And also at Jay's Field, I can tell you just from flying the Tough Wing and some other airplanes that when you get above the tree line, it changes. So, you come in for a low, kind of a low pass, or you do something down the field that you're going to land, and you go around and you get up into that, just above the tree line. Now you're in an area that doesn't have any resistance. So the wind, may be swirly down here, but up there it's a little bit stronger. And I've seen it, where I'm like, wait, why am I crabbing looking away from me? And then when I come in, I'm crabbing looking towards me.
Yeah, because we got those 2 giant hills on that one side, and then it's an open field, and then trees off to the one side we don't fly over. But so that can definitely make a difference for sure.
Yeah, the road behind you.
Yeah,
where you lose or the big tree. Yeah, he's got a big tree. He lost an airplane behind that tree. So. Well, I do think it's important to try and fly a square pattern, a rectangular pattern, because that's ultimately, if you went anywhere other than the field that you fly at, it's very important, because Apollo Field is a prime example. Although we talked about it, we've never flown there. We do know that it's very, very squished in between, the airspace there, because Van Nuys is very close. There's a park over there. There's a gun range over there, and you actually literally have to fly a rectangular pattern. If you get outside of that, then you encroach on other people's airspace, and you could have catastrophic type, events. So if you crash your airplane on the gun range, I'm sure they wouldn't appreciate that, and it may get it back with more than one. More than one piece.
I think they would really appreciate it.
But what I'm saying is that, we do get comfortable flying at our own fields, and when you start, moseying around to others, you have to kind of follow the rules. And if you can't fly this rectangular pattern, then you need to really practice, because when you go to someone else's, you're invited out, then you need to at least, fly that. And it helps everybody else too. When you guys in Texas are flying one at a time or a couple, I mean, I know that when you and I go out there, one of us is flying, the other one's charging batteries or putting batteries in, and sometimes we get up there and we get to fly both, but we're both going in the same direction, and we're both flying the same pattern, so that we're not fighting each other, looking around, unless we're combating each other.
Unless we're on purpose, yeah, because
right. Well, I mean,
when
if
you're
we're
doing wing
flying
fighting.
tough wings, If
And
we're
then
trying to
it's
hit
like,
each other with a tough
hey,
one.
slow down. I can't hit you. Slow down.
I can't get you.
Can you fly
I can't
straight
hit
for
you,
me so
slow
I can hit you? Yeah.
Right. Which is utterly amazing, right? I mean, Jay and I have flown these tough wings a half a dozen times, where we've flown try to hit each other and we can't ever hit each other. And the one time we're like, all right, screw it, we won't do it, and then bam, we run into each other, and it's just like, how did we even do that? So, but
I think Jay started the idea of smack talk as he's flying level. Come on, Mike, you can't even hit me. I'm like, I'm at the lowest throttle setting. Why can't you even get me? Like, I'm sitting here, like, it's not even windy.
Right.
Like, come on, dude.
Let me just hover right here, see if you could just hit me.
Exactly.
That's pretty funny. Well, it always happens, you jump out in front of each other, and it's troublesome. I've actually flown at fields where I came down, I stopped flying because the guys could not stay in the right pattern, and that, unfortunately, that's one of the things that really, like, you have those things in the back of your head that just kind of grate on you. It's like nails on a chalkboard, and flying in a pattern and then having somebody else be zigzagging around while you're flying in a pattern is very nerve-wracking to me. I don't like it, so I usually just land, and I'll be like, all right, just fly anywhere you want to fly. And then when you're done, I'll go back up and do the pattern work. But I know that when I first got started, both in the flying, the real world, right, the full scale, and the RC, that one of the things you have to do is go up and do hundreds and hundreds of patterns. Learning to fly, that's one of the things. Before you even solo, you have to learn how to go around the pattern. And you do probably 100 different landings before you even get to the point to go solo an airplane on your own. So when I, kind of got back into the RC world, and, Jay's like, hey, man, I got a simulator. All I did was go out there and do landings. And then when I got a real flight, I would start, they got a list of airplanes. I would start with the first airplane in the list, and I would go do 3 takeoffs and 3 landings, and then I go to the next airplane, 3 takeoffs and 3 landings. And I would do 3 in one way and 3 in the other way. So it was 6 per, and I would just move down there, and it got me where I was flying different airplanes, different speeds, different looks, but I could get every single one of those airplanes, up and around and back. And I think that helped me later on down the road, kind of helping my guys out of the field be test pilots for those guys, because it didn't matter what the airplane looked like or the speed of it. I was able to at least, maintain this pattern. So I think it'll definitely help out if you're able to do that. So hopefully everything we talked about, will help you guys out. Any last comments, Jay, or anything that you have to add before we
I guess the biggest thing is just, it's finally summer, so get out and go fly. That's, like I said, for Jim and I, we just got out to the field, and we're definitely making play dates so we can get out there 1 or 2 times a week and get our skill levels back up. So
excellent. That's what I like to hear. Mike?
Yeah. No mic there. Mike, no mic.
Yeah. You want to try that again, because Mike muted himself.
muted myself. So I think I'm going to have to try to get out more in the morning, early morning. I think that's the better time to fly. And then that way I can get some time out. But I gotta repair some planes too, so I got some work to do.
Okay. Well, that's exciting. I think you're coming down in a few days. I think you'll be out here.
Yep.
So maybe we'll do some flying when we're out here. That'll be fun.
That'll be good.
Go out, visit the guys, and maybe hit the field once or twice and see what the big guys are doing. So,
always fun.
Yeah. Well, that pretty much wraps it up. Hopefully everything that we've talked about gives you a good idea of how to fly crosswinds. Reach out to us at the parkflyerpodcast@gmail.com, or go on our Facebook listeners and give us your story. Maybe some of the things that you would do to help learn crosswinds, or that you did do to learn crosswinds. And let us know what you think. So, Park Flyer Podcast Listeners Group on Facebook, or parkflyerpodcast@gmail.com. Either one of those. Well, for this episode, I'm going to sign off. I'm Michael from Arizona.
And I'm Jay from the hills of Texas.
And I'm AK Mike in Texas, unmuted.
There you go. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Let's fly.
You have been listening to the Park Flyer Podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to your next visit. Please give our show a star rating and review, and feel free to email us your questions, topics, or suggestions to parkflyerpodcast at gmail.com.